Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's spotlight shines on the rising stars of the legal world, where young firms, bold ideas, and smarter systems take center stage. Standing tall at the intersection of law and leadership, he's the digital strategist, the legal growth architect, the man with the mic. Make some noise for your host, Will McCreight. And today's guest, proof that modern law isn't about working more. It's about working smarter. Welcome, David Vicknair. The game is changing. Let's get you in it. This is Legal Currents with Will McCreight.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Legal Currents podcast. Today we have a very special guest, a good friend, David Vicknair. For anyone who is not familiar with David, he is the founding partner of Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers out in New Orleans. Maybe the most popular pizza reviewer on the internet as well, I would go as far as to say. But David, I appreciate you taking a couple minutes to jump on with me.
Thank you. It's very nice of you to say that, Will. There have been some very good pizza reviews that I've had that have not been used over the years, one of which is with Nalini that we're not going to talk about on the air, but
yeah,
it's good to be with you.
Hidden away in the vaults, and I'm looking forward to getting on and doing our pizza review. I know that we
keep
tried
missing
to
it.
make that happen.
We'll get it done.
Now, David, obviously, like I mentioned, founding partner of Scott Vicknair. Prior to this, spent a couple years as an attorney at another firm. But something that jumped out to me that I thought was a really curious and would be a fun way to start this conversation. You spoke, I think it was on LinkedIn. You put some information out about how being the president of your fraternity back in college carried a lot of skills over to your journey as an entrepreneur and kind of starting your own law firm. I'm curious, could you expand on that a little bit, and maybe one story in particular that you feel has really kept with you throughout the years?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and 100% true. I was president of my fraternity for a little bit over 2 years. I was actually one of the charter members of our SAE chapter at Nicholls State University. Still very close with a lot of the guys who I was in the fraternity with. I was with two of them last weekend at dinner with their wives. Man, so many lessons. It was an incredible lesson in collaboration and teamwork, 75 different personalities and perspectives and opinions on almost everything. How do you marshal consensus? How do there's certain things we want to do in the fraternity, but you have to get a majority vote, or some votes are 2/3, and you're concerned like some of them are controversial. And so you'd spend a lot of time convincing privately or in different groups to let other people see your perspective and why you wanted something to happen. But also listening. The biggest lesson I learned in the fraternity was listening, because I look back and realize I was like an 18-year-old little brash jerk who thought he knew everything when I went to college. And the fraternity, I played football for a year and then did the fraternity. And the fraternity, whipped that out of me quickly and made me realize how valuable of a trait and skill listening is. Because listening allows you to understand other people's perspectives, to understand where they're coming from. But most importantly, I think for law firms, is listening teaches me now things like I just went and asked a case manager 20 minutes ago, a very small thing, but I'm like, oh, I didn't even know we were doing that. And so listening makes me realize things that are happening in the firm that I may not even been aware of. And as you get bigger, those things happen more and more. And so I think listening becomes an even more important trait and skill to develop and work on every day. And that was the biggest lesson I learned from the fraternity. Listen.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And before we jump further into some similar stories and questions there, why don't you tell us a little bit about, the firm, where you guys are at now, but, how that has changed and what has led you to where you're at currently?
Sure. So the firm is me and my law partner, Brad Scott, who does all the state work. He is almost like a different firm within the firm. We're actually a lot like Price Benowitz, if you're going to be honest. And so I know Seth's firm does criminal defense and personal injury. So we do estate and personal injury. Brad's group is all in estate and successions in Louisiana, and I am all personal injury. And it works great. It's not competing practice areas. We're very complementary to each other. There's some joint marketing here and there that Brad and I do together, like the podcast, some of our client mailers, different things like that. But anything that is like estate niche or injury niche, and from the marketing program perspective, we kind of just run that on our own. Our different marketing departments, we do it on our own as we see fit. Obviously, protecting the brand and the organization, but we have different websites and social stacks for each practice group. Brad, you can find at louisianasuccessionattorney.com. And then the injury group is really centered at scottvicknair.com. And so that's kind of the makeup of the firm and how it's structured. Brad and I have been working together for 10 years now. He's like a big brother to me. He's the one who convinced me to go out on my own. It is 10 years next month, June of 2015. And when I was trying to build my own practice, figure out what I was doing, and when I started for about 5 or 6 years when I went out on my own, it was a mix of construction and business litigation along with some injury stuff as it came in the door, was referred over, was that type of thing. And at some point back in 2021 or 2022 is when I really decided, I love my business clients, I love my construction clients, they're great people, but this is not really the business I want to be in or the practice I want to have anymore. And honestly, still to this day, 2025, we have like 6 or 7 residual construction and business cases we're still closing out, just 'cause I haven't had the heart to like withdraw and tell the client to go find a new lawyer because I like him so much. But that's kind of where we are now. My group is all personal injury, close to that's almost like 99.9% of our cases.
Yeah. So something that I always love to hear about are the stories that led people to want to go out on their own, right? So talk a little bit about your experience prior to having your own firm, and what that light bulb moment was where you said, hey, I think it's time for me to start my own journey here.
That was a great experience. I worked for 4 years for a very experienced trial lawyer, a guy named Red Favre, who was my mentor and an incredible guy. He came from an era, I like to describe it as non-mediation era, when mediation wasn't in vogue. And so he had tried hundreds of jury trials. And the biggest gift that he gave me, besides a job that was a good paying job and being a good mentor and teaching me how to practice law, was Rhett was at an age when I started working with him where he was kind of like, I'm over litigation. I'm tired of the interlocutory motion practice. I'm tired of preparing for depositions. And he just kind of dumped it all on me. And that was like the biggest gift I received in practice, because I spent 4 years doing, I can't even tell you how many depositions that I had no business doing, appearing for hearings I had no business appearing for, trying cases, both to verdict. And so, it was a blessing in disguise, but at the same time, the impetus for me, not blessing in disguise, it was a blessing. And the impetus for me to go on my own was really just an age gap. Rhett was, which I totally understand, is like he was a guy who was like connected to paper and a certain way to run his practice. And so like there would always be, I don't want to say friction, but a resistance to, at the time, tell you how long ago this was, Clio in my case were like the revolutionary things. It was like cloud-based case management software back then. And so that was like, there was some resistance from Rhett to do that, just because he's like, hey, I built this successful practice. I do these things my way, which I totally respect. So it wasn't really controversial at all. It was just like, hey, I want to go out on my own because I see a different way to do this, which involves technology, which was really burgeoning in the legal sphere at that time, and has obviously come a long way in the last 10 years.
Yeah, quite a long ways. And even probably the last 10 months has come an extremely long way.
Yeah, I have a joke. Every company name now is like something .ai at the freaking conferences that I go to for long. Like, is everybody AI now? But in any event.
And I want to talk more about conferences, because that's where we kind of started getting to know each other a little bit. But I'm curious, something that you said in a couple different ways that I really value is that idea of different perspectives or mentorships, right? And the right groups. And I think that's something that's really important for younger attorneys, whether it's just for their personal careers or looking at growing and scaling their firm, right? Can you talk about your experiences in all of these different groups and what takeaways you've been able to receive or value that you've gotten out of being in those groups with the right peoples, with the right mentors?
Great question. What I would say for every young lawyer or somebody who's thinking about getting in that sphere of like, how do I go find a group that fits me right, is a bit of self-analyzation, like what's important to you. For me, humility and people with growth mindsets, so people who are eager learners and eager to share, are important to me because I'm not like, if I'm going to leave town and go somewhere for 3 or 4 days, I want to be surrounded by people who are interested in learning, looking at new things, and who are going to share it. I'm not interested in being in a circle of people who are just going to like brag or talk about how wonderful they are. I mean, it's just not my thing. More power to you, but I'm not spending my free time doing that crap. So for me, I was naturally drawn to a few specific organizations because of that. But I also think, I know it's like your job, right? But as a lawyer, at least for me, and every lawyer's got to make this decision because it's what they want. But like for me, I really try to limit the conferences I go to because they're like, somebody asked me yesterday, literally this question, like, what legal conferences are there? I'm like, which ones aren't there? There are like 1,000 of them. So like, pick the ones that really you find that that help you take 3, 4, 5 things back to your firm to hopefully implement change in an effective way to help your firm get more efficient, get better results for the clients, or grow, whatever your main objective is to get out of the conference. And those are some of the things that I think about when I decide on like, hey, am I going to these conferences? Am I joining these groups? Am I going to be surrounded by those types of people who are going to share, who are going to want to grow and have that type of mindset? And am I going to get something valuable out of this trip? Otherwise, I'm not going. I have better things to do. So
Yeah. Look, resources are not just money, right? Your time, especially, when you are in the early stages of growing and scaling the firm, but really no matter where you're at, that time is maybe the most valuable resource that exists. To your point, there are a million different conferences, and at these conferences, there are a million different vendors who have all of these different things, stuff that you've never heard of. I'm sure that 3 months from now, there will be all kinds of things that we've both never heard of, right?
Right.
That are just entirely new. And I think that information overload can be a bit, daunting, right? And it is very real. I know that you're someone who really values being innovative and trying new things and testing stuff out. But how do you find that balance between, trying to stay innovative, trying to stay cutting edge, but not falling into the trap of like the new bright shiny objects and really being smart with the resources you have?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's hard, and and complicated, which is not an easy answer. But I'm a lawyer, so I'm not going to be able to give you an easy answer. I think the first conference I kind of went to that opened my eyes to a lot of this stuff was Great Legal Marketing. And so Ben and Brian Glass, wonderful people,
Shout out to
and
Ben and
you'll
Brian.
know them. And
Yep.
that was like a lot. It was like information overload. That was back in 2022. It was like a fire hose hitting you in the face. And just through, you meet good people. Like you meet them. You meet people like you, Nalini. You meet other people, not necessarily just lawyers, like good, like Blue Shark, Hennessy. There's all kind of other SEO vendors who have good growth mindset type people who you develop friendships and relationships with. And so, in developing the relationships that I've developed over the years, what I try to do is just ask, like, once again, we go back to listening, ask smart people, like, hey, what do you think about so and so? And you ask enough smart people and you start to get consistent trends, like, okay, maybe that organization's a good organization. Maybe this conference is a good conference. And then you just try it. And you go to one, you try one, maybe it ends up not being the right fit to you, but that leads to another road of like, oh, okay, I think this organization or this vendor or this idea would be good for my law firm. And so it becomes a lot of listening, and also not trying to recreate everything yourself. That's a hallmark of hubris and people thinking they have to do something on their own. Like everybody in the law firm, law practice space has generally figured everything out. So you don't have to come up with everything all over again because you're proud or you think you're the smartest person in the world. Like humble yourself a little bit and observe what others are doing really well and learn from them and figure out how, not steal it, but how do you take that and repurpose it in a way that works for your firm and your practice?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And you mentioned something about that idea of decision making, trying it, and something I've heard you talk about a couple times in the past is the importance of decision making, right? Not necessarily the right or the wrong decision, but actually making the decision itself. And that's something that can be really challenging, right? Especially early on with the limited resources that you may have. What are some of your experiences with, making a decision, whether it was the right or the wrong decision, and how that decision helped, impact or kind of shape the results that you get from it?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to Ben Glass because it kind of started with him. I started listening to his podcast, and Ben's got a good analogy. Like, you are the racehorse of your law practice. So if you went and invested a lot of money and bought a racehorse, whether it was hopefully for you, Secretariat or somebody like that, right? Are you going to feed them McDonald's French fries and chicken nuggets from Burger King? Or are you going to feed them good rice? Are you going to feed them good grass? Are you going to have a top-notch trainer training them? Are you going to work on the things that matter for them to be effective? And for us as lawyers, we don't run, but I do think health training is important for our mental state. Our mind is our racehorse. And so working on your mindset sounds esoteric, but it is like problem number one, like fixing your freaking mindset. And it's a thing you have to work on daily. I work on it daily. I read books. It's not that complicated. Go order Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. Go order Unreasonable Hospitality, which talks about hospitality in a company. Go read any of these good to great. I can go down the line of books that are important to help you work on concepts in your mindset. Leaders Eat Last, another good one. So working on that is important because it ultimately helps become the fulcrum point for decision making. And when your mind's in the right place, you can make good decisions. When you're centered, you can make good decisions. And the last thing I would say about it that I've learned over the years is the right decision. This is a John Chazal quote, but the right decision made 3 months too late is still the wrong decision. Like, just make a freaking decision. Like, if it's wrong, so what? Like, that's a little bit I've noted, like, as a lawyer problem, we have this hubris, like, and that's also a fixed mindset problem, which is we don't want to fail because we're afraid that reflects on our abilities, our intelligence level. Somebody who has a growth mindset, who works on their mindset, understands that failure is a concomitant of succeeding and growing as a person. And so you make the decision. If it fails, you learned from it. And that's a valuable thing. But it's better to just decide instead of sitting around and going in circles for 3 months.
Yeah, that fear of failure is something that I would imagine a lot of our listeners, kind of feel, right? And it's something that everybody experiences. How do you manage that fear of failure? What role does that play in just the scale of a firm?
I'm laughing because I used to be a lot more worried about it. Now I just don't give a shit. It's like the evolution of your mindset. And so I mean it. It's just like working out. Like if you lift weights, for example, or if you're an avid lacrosse player, if you're an avid soccer player, like the more you practice, the better you get at it. So the more decisions you make and the more you fail, the better you get at making decisions and understanding the risk associated with them. And so you just kind of get in a groove. It becomes contagious, almost like COVID. So the more decisions you make, the more you're like, okay, I can make more and more decisions. I do think Jeff Bezos has like a great quote on this, which is that human nature, we should be like aware of our own biases. Like we are all wired as humans to be too wired towards failure, like concern of failure, fear of failure. So his argument is, and I think he's right, is as humans, if we acknowledge that we're wired to be too afraid of failure and to undervalue the missed opportunity of not making the decision and taking the risk, if we understand that and we cognitively day to day bias ourselves away from that and understand the risk is not as big as we fear it to be, then it just kind of becomes less risky. And so I think about that all the time now. I'm like, this isn't as risky as I've convinced myself it is, and it just makes the decision easier.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's something that everybody needs to be cognizant of, aware of. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing, your experiences there. I wanted to rewind. I was trying to figure out where it was that we first met, and I think it must have been PILMA back in 2022. Is kind of my rough math there. PILMA is a conference that I know you still go and attend. We like to go and attend that event as well. I think there's a lot of great people there, but the idea of going to a conference, right? If you're a small firm, even solo practitioner, right? Taking 3 to 4 days away from the firm to go and attend an event, go and attend a conference, that is a big ask, right? Especially when you are wearing a million different hats. But those are also great experiences to learn from the people and that you're, are where you want to be, and ask them questions and stay cutting edge. How do you find that balance, right? Because it's important to go and attend these things for the long term, but short term, 3 to 4 days away from the practice can be really, really tough. What's your experience been like there?
Yeah, so it's I think it has more of an impact when you're starting out and you're smaller. Now that we're getting bigger, we're adding to get up to, we have about 30 people now shortly in the PI group. And so I have a COO now, and I have an administrative team, and I have a marketing team. So I have these teams now, which as you get bigger, if you want to get bigger, which ultimately, like, not everybody does. And guess what? That's okay too. Like, that's another thing I think people need to understand for the journey. Like, not everyone needs to scale, and not everybody needs to grow. You really need to build the firm that you want and what works for you. And so some people may be very happy having a successful firm that has 5 or 10 people. They can do well financially, have a great practice and great business, and that's what they want. And that's freaking awesome. This should not be like in this space when you're starting a firm. I get real revved up about this. I feel like everybody's pushed to just grow, 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 grow for the sake of growing without understanding what are they even trying to do and what matters to them. But when you're smaller, it's harder to get away. And I think what it boils down to is just think about it like this. If you walked out in the street tomorrow and you got hit by a truck and you were in the hospital for a month and a half, and your entire team, whether it was 4 people or 10 people or 20 people, just had to pick up the slack and run the operations when you were gone, they would. Okay. And so you being gone for 3 or 4 days is not going to destroy your law practice. It's not going to imperil your clients. Everything will be fine. Just like when you go on vacation, which you need to block off vacations. I'm bad about that, but it will be okay. So just block the days off, move your deadlines, get your hearings, your depositions scheduled around it, and just go. Just do it. I hate to be all Nike about it, but there's no other way I can say it than that. So.
They got that slogan right for sure. You mentioned, right, you guys on the PI side of things have a team of about 30, right? And it's going to be different for every firm. And you make a great point about, what the goals actually are of the firm. But, if someone is starting out there entirely on their own, right, what are some of the first things that they should look to implement into their firm to help free up resources of time, right? How does that look like? What would you recommend people explore first?
It's just I would say it's like riding a bike. You got to take it one piece at a time. So it's like, for me, the first thing I hired was a legal assistant, somebody who could handle phone calls for me, could organize things for me, could help support the files, right? And so there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like, it doesn't mean that was the right way to do it. Some people will add a receptionist first. That could be the right way too. Some people will add another lawyer first. So you just add a team member here and there, and you just kind of F around and find out. I don't want to curse on the podcast, but you just kind of feel it around. Like,
on the podcast.
What's that?
We're good to curse on the podcast.
You just fuck around and find out, and is the bottom line. You just kind of try some things. Some things are not going to work. Some things are going to work, but you have to hire a person here and there to figure out what are the levers I can use in hiring people to take things off my desk. The biggest trick is to write out a list of the things you don't like. Some lawyers may like HR. I loathe it. It's the thing I hate more than anything. But is it important? Yes, it's very, very important. And so for me, like, a big fulcrum in my life and happiness when I finally had somebody who was in charge of administration and HR, to where it wasn't me anymore. And so that made me very happy. That was good to me. The second thing I would really say, I try to say this a lot about, and this is another Ben and Brian Glass credit, is, you don't think when you're starting out, like, the importance of picking a software that is going to manage your lists, the people who you represent, the friends and family who you can solicit. But that becomes very powerful over time. It's not like exciting. It's not like a new AI tool. It doesn't like get revolutionized on the stage at all the conferences, but it is a very basic fundamental marketing foundation that every person starting out of practice should think about. Like, what database am I going to manage my list in? How does it organize them? We use Keep and Infusionsoft, which is probably overcomplicated than what it needs to be. We like it, but there's many other things out there that I know different people use. But putting all these names in that freaking list, if they call you and you can't help them, still get their information and put them in your list, because when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money to put towards marketing, but if you do want to stay top of mind and stay in front of your people, the simplest way is through emails and print newsletters and birthday cards and holiday cards. And those are the real levers that you can pull and do from day one.
Yeah, the element of that grassroots at the end of the day, right? When you don't have a surplus of cash to spend on different ways to market yourself, right? The easiest thing that you can do is go out there and shake hands and be yourself and be friendly.
And I
I
made that
appreciate,
mistake, just FYI, as
yeah,
we didn't really manage it cleanly from when I first started, but it's been something we have been like militant about for the last 5 years. And even as much like we're on TV, we are in many different marketing mediums. We spend a lot of money on SEO, on digital PPC. Irrespective of all that, I am militant about our list and getting everybody possible on that list because it is very, very important.
yeah. We're both sports guys, right? And I like to think of it as, in basketball, right? Everybody wants to go out and practice the half court pull ups that, Steph Curry does. It seems like half the NBA is able to do these days, right? But if you can't shoot your free throws, if you're a 50% free throw shooter, you are not going to be in the game in the last minute and a half because they're going to have to sub you out and put someone in who can shoot free throws, right?
Amen.
So you can shoot all the 50-foot pull ups that you want, but you need to make sure that you're able to shoot your free throws as well. Otherwise, you're not going to be in there at crunch time. And I think that's something that is easy to forget, right? Um, when we're looking at those failures, I think it's also easy to look at people who have scaled their firms and have think, these guys have gotten it all figured out, right? They know everything. They've done it perfectly, and I think it's important to be transparent about failure, right? And things that you've done. I'd be curious to hear about a time when you were scaling up to where you're at now where, you made a decision, it was the wrong one, right? And how you took that experience and learned from it.
Oh, that is a long list. It's like a scroll. I mean, truthfully, if you look at some of the best firms in the country, they've made a graveyard of mistakes. We've all
Yeah.
made them. And so, pinning one of them is like nearly impossible. I mean, we've been through for one of our first SEO vendors we ever worked with, it was not Blue Shark, obviously. It's like we spent lots of money on the website, didn't listen to other people, which was not really my decision, but is a whole different story, who warned us. And when we wrapped the SEO contract, they sent us our site in code on a thumb drive. So it's like, okay, we spent $70,000 for a thumb drive of code. That was a disaster. So I've got a list of all those things that have happened, but truthfully, for example, the trials that I've learned the most from have been the ones that we got zeroed, either by the judge or the jury. And you can still learn things from all the trials that we've won, and there are a lot of those, but like you don't learn as much as when you lose. And so what we still talk about all the time at the firm right now is like we have a culture we're building of being open about mistakes and things we're doing poorly so that the entire team can learn from them because every mistake is an opportunity for learning and growth. And so all those experiences like that one, for example, were an opportunity for learning and growth. I learned from that about vendor vetting, like understanding who are reputable, good vendors with good people who are going to treat you well. And even if you stop working with them, they will be professional in the transition because they are smart enough and understand that you may come back to them one day and they want to cultivate and maintain that relationship. And so that was one that was just like one of many over the years with like improper vendor vetting and like understanding who's the right people, type of people to work with. And that also dovetails in, Will, to what we were just talking about going to different conferences because that allows you to kind of get a feel from other lawyers and see and interact with other vendors in the space, third parties who service the firm in different areas, whether it be SEO, PPC, LSAs, you name it, who are reputable, who are good people. If you work with them for a couple of years and you decide to go separate ways, they're not going to send you crap on a thumb drive.
Yeah. And something like your digital, right? Like this is an asset that you want to benefit you 15 years from now, right?
Right.
Down the line. But in the same way that can occur, we need to make sure that you're preventing it from being something that you're trying to dig yourself out of 10 years from now because the foundation wasn't done the right way.
Right.
How do you set expectations with these vendors and, trust them and allow them to do what they need to do in order to be successful, but also ensure that you are able to hold them accountable and kind of have that expectation?
So there's a difference between being direct and being an asshole. I'm just a direct person. Like, I'm going to be very honest about what I'm trying to accomplish, what my goals are, and then also in the process of working with different vendors and different people who work on stuff and support the firm, if I'm going to be like, I sent an email this morning to one of them like, hey, I'd like to know about number one and number two. And it's a follow-up, it's a professional, but it's direct and it's straight to the point. And so once you get in a habit and a pattern with working with people, they start to understand they're not being rude. Number one, being rude is just not nice, right? And number two, you get a lot more bees with honey. So like, I think some lawyers unfortunately view vendors as expendable and like trash. And I'm like, they're wonderful people. They're trying to help you and help your firm. And just like the clients who are nice to you and you are like more motivated to work hard on their case because you're kind to them, you can be direct but be kind. And if they're not meeting your expectations, you don't have to trash them. You just have to say we're going in a different direction. And that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that maybe they weren't a good fit. Maybe they weren't the right fit at that time, but you've also allowed the door to stay open to do work with them in the future because they may end up being somebody you decide to come back to. So it really just comes down to just being nice and being direct, for me at least. I'm not perfect. Probably have been rude, rubbed some people the wrong way, and when you do, if they bring it up, you apologize. Like, that's freaking life. It's growth. You learn from it. You try to be a nicer and better person the next time.
Yeah, I, would go as far to say as well, like on the vendor side of things, right? Like having that communication back and forth is helpful, right? And having the expectations, to help is something that should help everybody, but also being upfront and direct when those expectations aren't being met is an important part of the process to help correct that ship as well, right? And do what you can to get things on the right track. I don't know if you had any other thoughts there.
Yeah, my only other thought is like if you really want to hold a particular company who's working for you accountable as far as like meeting your expectations, like you have to do the work of getting involved and understanding what it is that they're doing to at least to the point where you can intelligently discuss it. And so, you take LSAs, for example. We have a person who works with, we manage that internally for the most part, but we do have an external vendor who does certain things with us on the LSA account. And I know the LSA world. Like, I've learned it. I've taught it to myself. And so when I talk to him, I speak LSA. It's like we're speaking French and it's two French people. So like the expectations are clear because I understand the language he speaks. And you do, if you want to be involved, or if your particular team member, whether it's a marketing director, an office administrator, or whoever it is, your intake director, if they're going to hold different people, we have people in all those departments working with us daily, accountable, they have to speak their language and be able to enunciate and outline exactly what they expect.
Yeah, all very, very true. And we touched on this, but the idea of conferences, right? There's a million of them out there. If you had to start your own conference tomorrow, right, for firms that are looking to scale, and you had 3 things that you could present about, right? What would 2 to 3 things be that you would highlight in your own conference? Someone who's starting entirely from scratch.
That's a good question. The first one would be a lot of the stuff that Great Legal Marketing talks about. I think it's a great organization for people just starting out, up to a certain revenue level. List management, print marketing, email marketing, like all those things which are high production, low cost stuff. Number one, that would be like most of the conference. Like, how do you manage a list? What are the types of things that you should mail? How often should you send email? What should the email highlight? Those types of things. Number 2 would be digital, because in my opinion, digital is like the second and most important in the food chain after TV of lead funnels. And so, what does it mean to build a culture that prioritizes and rewards Google reviews? Besides that, what else matters digitally? You have LSA, You have all these other public profiles. We're going into the age of AI. Like I'm looking 3 to 5 years ahead of time right now and worrying about things digitally. It's not, I'm not discounting Google reviews. Like they're critical, they're important. We get them every week. We talk about them. We're like obsessed with them. We bathe in them. We eat them. We like have a drink of them before we go to freaking bed. But like at the end of the day, like the world is evolving. And as a result of that, AI will become important. And so understanding what factors go into AI overviews and AI search and ChatGPT, like we're evolving and worrying about those things now. So digital would be really number two. And the third would be mindset. How do you develop and work on and cultivate a positive growth mindset to help your practice be successful? What are some of the starting blocks, the starting places to start there? I always tell people go listen to Ben Glass's podcast. It's a great start for mindset because Ben is really into the mindset aspect of this. Like he's not, I don't think he'd be offended if I said this, but like he knows the nuts and bolts. He knows the blocking and tackling, but the thing he has passion for is convincing lawyers to get out of our own ways and think differently and think like an abundance growth mindset person does. And then just start reading about that and honing in on that and working on it. And then eventually you just become obsessed with it because your personal life, your professional life just gets better when you fix your mindset.
Yeah, Ben and Brian are fantastic. We'll have to link maybe or put a link in the description to their podcast. I had the pleasure of speaking at the GLM conference that you mentioned last year, and it was a great event with a ton of different perspectives from a lot of different people about growing and scaling the firm. And I couldn't agree more. And everything that you shared there as well, I think are extremely valuable. You make a great point about AI, right? And the idea of search, right? A year or two from now, right? I would not be surprised to see, levels where, people are getting, 20 to 30% of that search volume coming in through AI, potentially more, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just establishing, protecting yourself now, but being proactive and finding that balance of, okay, how do I implement my resources for what's working right now? And how do I, implement resources to stay ahead of the curve as things change down the line, especially in the legal profession where people are not always thinking like that,
Yeah, and that's a
right?
concrete example, Will. You're 100% right of like the importance of being in a group of people who think that way and being surrounded by people that think that way. Like, y'all are in the world of that in SEO world at Blue Shark. Seth has got that podcast. He's bringing people on all the time with him and Jay Ruane, another great podcast. And all those people who come on their podcast are talking about these types of things. Like, what do they see coming down the pike? So, being a constant learner is number one. Like, you have to be willing to consistently learn because world's changing around us and it's affecting our law practices. So, you either get ahead of it or you be 5 years late. It's your choice.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Last question for you. I want a prediction for the Saints record this year. Tell me who the starting quarterback is going to be, and have you guys finally figured it out with it? I don't know. And also tell me, is it Shu? Is it like Show? Is that how do you pronounce his name? The rookie that you guys took?
You pronounce his name Tyler. Yeah, I thought I was going to get an easy question, like, what's your favorite book? It's a Shoe Dog, by the way. I think
I love that book. I love
an
that book.
amazing book. I think this is a hard one. I suspect that we will probably end up starting Tyler Show. I think it's Show. I got to work on it. I think we'll probably end up starting him, but I think you're going to see a mix of Taysom and Spencer Rattler in the fold early season before we get to him. The prediction is so difficult because we have a very good roster on paper. And now because Derek Carr retired, we just saved about 30 million in salary cap. Depending upon what year it hits, I'm not positive. So there's some extra space for them to do some things. But part of the issue that we have is our defense is just aging. Some of our stars are close to retirement, whether it be Cam or DeMario. And so we need to get a bit younger on defense. But man, you look at our roster and our line is solid. Our running backs are solid. We're fine at tight end. We have good receivers. Our defense is a solid roster. And so I'm gonna just go out on a limb as a homer and say we're gonna win 10 games, but the variable there truly is the quarterback position, which is the make or break of everything these days in the NFL. And so I think if Taysom can stay healthy, that we can win 10 games because I think he's going to play more, not necessarily start and be the starter, but we used to just feature him like in third down sets when Breeze was playing and things like that because of his running ability. But I think we're going to feature him a lot more predominantly this year just because of his experience, and it'll take a little bit of pressure off of Spencer and Tyler. And then those two are going to kind of battle it out to see who's ready. I'm excited if nothing else because we don't know what's going to happen. So we're finally looking forward to it. We wish we had Jaden Daniels. We're very angry about that. And so that's all I have to say about that.
You know what? I was gonna say that Jaden Daniels is a great example. A quarterback away, from 3-13 or whatever it was to all of a sudden, NFC Championship game for the Commanders and a 12-5 record. It really could be like that.
Well, Jaden Daniels is really also a great example of the incompetency of hubris. Like, if you looked at Jaden Daniels, he was coming out 3 years after Joe Burrow was coming from LSU. So you had a clear example, if you're the Chicago Bears, right in front of you of like in the SEC, an LSU quarterback and what he did in the NFL in that transition coming from that conference in that school. And if you looked at Jaden Daniels' numbers at LSU, they were far superior to Joe Burrow's. And so what the Chicago Bears were thinking, I have no idea, but it's inert to the benefit of the Washington Commanders because it was the stupidest draft pick that they've probably ever made. Now, Caleb Williams may well end up not being a bust and may succeed in the NFL, but I think early on at least, it looks like a completely incompetent decision on their part.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic for the Commanders, terrible for my wallet as ticket prices have skyrocketed. From
Jaden's
last
also
year.
just a great young guy, man. He's
Great
awesome.
guy.
He was wonderful at LSU. Everybody down here loved him, and I know everybody down here is just really excited to see him succeeding. And I know for a fact because I've had to buy my nephew a Commanders Jaden Daniels jersey.
We love it. We love it. And I'll tie it all back in with the idea of the cutting edge stuff. Something that they came out and talked about with Jaden Daniels at LSU is the idea that LSU started incorporating virtual reality
Hmm.
into their day-to-day operations, right? Where all of a sudden, a guy is able to get hundreds of more reps by using something like VR, right, without having to put the wear and tear on your body. And that's a great example of, how staying cutting edge, how looking ahead and utilizing new things that are out there can really be something that you can use to your advantage over top of people who aren't really taking that stuff and doing it. I think a lot of the success that Jaden has seen from tools like that is going to result in a lot more of the league doing that. But a fun way to kind of tie everything back together there with the idea of staying cutting edge and ahead of the curve.
Well, how many games do you think Washington's going to win this year?
All of them. Undefeated season.
What a country.
Um,
Okay, so they're going to
you know
go.
what?
They're going to go. What is it? 78 Dolphins, who were the only undefeated team. I forgot what year it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, something like that. But no, real prediction. It's a tough division. I think that we finish close with the Eagles. I want to say, a 13-4 record. Not sure that wins the division. I think we stay competitive. But with where we were at 2 years ago, if we can just win a playoff game, like I'll be happy with that. And I think that, next year is where you may start hearing some Super Bowl conversations. I may have to book my tickets.
Well,
Or,
and we know Price Benowitz is now the official injury lawyers of the Washington
that's
Commanders.
true.
So I hope that was locked in for many years. There's no variable pricing on Seth and his law partners.
It was, and that's a fantastic story. And sorry to say this, Seth, but hopefully we do not hear the Price Benowitz injury report for too many more people this time this season. And I appreciate you taking some time to jump on with me, David. I guess, is there anything you want to plug? Do you want to let people know where they can hear more from you, LinkedIn, anything like that?
Now, the
Before
only
you
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is we're located in New Orleans. We do injury cases all across the state of Louisiana. If anybody ever has a case down here, they want to consider co-counseling and referring to us. We love what we do. We do it the right way. We care about our clients. We get great results. And so we'd love and appreciate if you considered us. You can find us at scottvicknair.com. You can also check out our podcast, the Overruled podcast with Scott Vicknair, on Apple, Spotify, all the things. And hopefully we'll have you on, Will. And it's been just a great time chatting with you. I really appreciate it.
And check out the pizza as well if you're looking for a pizza spot out in the area.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, David. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.